have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So a deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this wonderful land of ours. I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that affects so many aspects of our daily lives. It affects everything from our individual relationships, our marriages, our families, our communities, and our politics, our government. It affects everything, whether we choose to recognize it or not, or whether we choose to admit to ourselves and to reckon with the phenomenon or not. Character is the defining issue of our time. And the premise of this program, and indeed the premise of all of the work that I've done throughout my professional career, including the many books that I've written and the hundreds of online articles and all the training workshops that I've done, the operating premise is that we cannot be a great country until we are individually and collectively great in character. Because it is when good, decent people with a solid internal moral compass are left alone, are not interfered with unnecessarily, are not restrained unnecessarily by their government. It is when such good people with decency of character, it's when they tend to thrive and prosper and create opportunities not just for themselves, but also for others. And that's the basic operating premise of the country. But we find ourselves in difficult times. We find ourselves in a time where character dysfunction has become so commonplace, and where the kinds of character disturbances that are really regarded with fright have become so egregious that it's hard to tell how far off-center we've become. It's hard to tell because that slippery slope has been so incremental of character decline. It's happened over such a long period of time and so very slowly and steadily and surely. that we've become desensitized. We almost kind of expect things. It takes new and more outrageous examples of character disturbance to catch our attention. And I've been of a mind to help do something about that through my writings, my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People. This book has been published in numerous foreign languages, and it is the definitive book many regard on the covert aggressive personality, the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing, the person who looks good on the outside but is not so good on the inside and uses a lot of tactics, covert tactics, to manipulate and control others. And also my book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age. This is the book that delves into all the various disturbed characters and what makes them tick, what really makes them tick, and most especially what to look for in the way of the proper kind of help that really can make a difference, because so many folks write me every week to say that they have tried to get help and only ended up feeling even worse because they experienced what we call many times therapy-induced trauma, whereby maybe even their manipulative partner was able to impression manage the therapist favorably, or was able to conceal their true self, and therefore didn't really gain any benefit, and things only got worse when they spent a lot of time and effort and, in many cases, a lot of money trying to make things better. And then, of course, my book, The Judas Syndrome for the Christian Faith Community. And then, lastly, my book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? The Relationship Partners Survival Guide, a guide to surviving and thriving in this character-disordered world of ours. So I've dedicated my life and my work to this problem, and I certainly hope that folks who have availed themselves of my work or of my counsel in many of the Skype-based consultations that I've done worldwide, or perhaps many of the hundreds of online articles, or even some of the workshops that I have given, I hope that my work has been able to make a difference for folks and improve their lives. And if you want to join the conversation tonight, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. And I'm happy to take your call if you want to join the conversation. We have had quite a few phone issues, unfortunately, with the program. That number, by the way, that I just gave out, 718-717-8296, I have now been told you can also Skype into that number. So if you are a Skype user and you are on Skype and you don't particularly want to use credits or pay any charges, if you don't have a cell phone that has unlimited all area code phone calling, or you don't have such a plan, no worries. I'm told that you can also Skype in at that same number, 718-717-8296. So if you want to join the conversation tonight, that's the number to call. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We are coming upon what for me is one of the favorite times of year, an inspirational time of year, but also a difficult time of year for many folks. I don't know how many of you realize just how difficult a time of year this time of year is for many folks, especially folks who are either estranged from their families for one reason or another, and therefore don't have family support during the holiday season. They also may have had a spate of financial bad luck. And it also might be a very difficult time because this is the time when a lot of folks are filled with joy and they're out there shopping like crazy and buying presents and looking for ways to express the love and care that they have for folks in their lives. And some folks just simply aren't able to do this. And sometimes through absolutely no fault of their own. So it can be a difficult time for a lot of reasons. And today I was really reminded of that fact. I was trailing along. Holiday shopping, I have to say, is not one of my favorite things. Holiday gift planning and gift giving, I kind of enjoy that. I really do like seeing smiling faces on Christmas morning as folks open presents and realize that we really have been thinking about them and really have been paying attention to things going on in their life and looking out for some things that they might need, et cetera, and looking for ways to bring a little joy into their life. So I get that part of it, and I really invest myself in that part of it. But the drudgery of gift buying, especially when you're not doing it online, and especially as crazy as it has become, I'm not a big fan of that. And I had an experience today, just before another experience that I want to tell you about. But I was going to stop in. My wife and my son, my older son, and wife were in one store doing some shopping for my daughter-in-law and for my granddaughter. And I was going to be meeting up with them after I picked up a few things from the dollar store not too far down. And my goodness, talk about pandemonium. And the worst part is not just the fact that there's a lot of people in there and that there are long lines and inadequate help, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the worst part. The worst part is witnessing how people behave. From the folks who come in and just absolutely trash the place, who, take things off the shelves, drop things on the floor, make an absolute mess of things, to those folks who are pushing and shoving. And it's really disheartening. It's really disheartening. And I confess I may have been one of those people today because it was so frustrating to be in a line that wasn't even moving because there were such inadequate help that I got weary of the few things that I was carrying, and because it was so almost impossible to get through people putting things back, I simply deposited things on my way out and just didn't bother anymore. So it's not the experience that I once remember it being. And we're not, it's not that bad a crunch time just yet. I think that's another reason why some folks prefer to do a lot of folks prefer to do their shopping online these days. and why a lot of businesses are struggling because of that. A lot of brick and mortar businesses are struggling for that reason. But the other experience I had was coming out of the one store and going into another, and I saw a woman bundled up very tightly who uh, said she was homeless and was looking for whatever help people could give. And sometimes these cases seem patently contrived, but this did not seem in any way such a case. And I listened attentively. I knew that I was going to do something to help this woman, but I listened attentively as passerby after passerby stopped and talked with her and offered her a buck or two or something to help her out. And so I caught a little bit of her story, and it was a really sad story. And it was one of those circumstances where, through no fault of her own, she literally finds herself on the street in an area with no family support. And I also listened as individual after individual wished her a Merry Christmas and asked what they could do, and she expressed gratitude for anything whatsoever. One person handed her the McDonald's takeout that he had just gotten. There was a McDonald's restaurant, perhaps 300 or 400 yards in the same shopping center that I was, and I could see that this person had come from the drive-in window and pulled up next to where this woman was sitting, got out of the car, and brought whatever he had purchased. And she broke down in tears just at the receipt of this. And then began to pray. And what I heard was her just thanking God over and over again. It just broke my heart. So in addition to the offering that I gave her when I went into the store where my older son was and my wife was, I told the story, and several other people heard it too. And we watched with great glee as others chipped in, and this woman had the same reaction to all. And she was praising God and thanking God for every little blessing coming her way. And it sent a message home, sent a big message home. There we were, thinking about how our already wonderful lives are going to be enriched by something that either the children have craved or something they think will bring some delight into their life. My own children are gaming fanatics to some degree, and they love all these intriguing board games and video games. My grandchildren do the same thing, and they're very high-tech savvy, and My grandson apparently is setting up his own YouTube channel. All these things are wonderful. All these things are wonderful. But it takes little incidents like the incident that I witnessed for us to realize what the real message of the time is and what the real importance of the time is. So I want to talk about that today because I don't usually. And this is not a program. This is not a program generally dedicated to religious topics or philosophical topics, especially a discussion of religion. But this is a special time of year, and I think it's worth talking about what really matters, because after all, from my experience, and I'm only going to talk from my experience here, this is a personal testimony. I am by far, not the best of characters. But I know in the pit of my soul that any shred of decency in my character comes from the great fortune that I had to be mentored and shaped, taught, and encouraged by those folks who instilled some religious principles in my life. And from what I was able to glean when I got serious about studying for myself and learning for myself just who Jesus, who we call the Christ, Yeshua, just who he was, and more importantly, what he meant by all that he came to say to us and urge us to do. You know, I know a lot of folks who place so much importance on this whole notion of acceptance of his saving role. It's almost like all you have to do is say the magic words, and everything is better. Your life is different. The gates of heaven open up for you. And I'm not sure that that's what he meant. I think there's much more to it than that. Otherwise, why would someone waste 3 years, 3 difficult years, going from town to town, place from place, and carrying messages to people about how to live their lives, about the things that are really important, about what really matters. Then I had the good fortune to read. I had the good fortune to read a book by the author Garry Wills. That's Wills, Garry Wills. And this book was really instrumental in opening my eyes. The title of the book was What Jesus Meant. And his opening premise was that that Jesus said a lot of things. And of course, a lot of the things that he said really matters. But what mattered even more was what he meant by what he said. And that's something that many times folks didn't contemplate all that deeply. So, for that reason, I really got into this book. And it just was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener. And I came for the first time to see something that I felt compelled to write about later on, which is one of the reasons I wrote my book, The Judas Syndrome, which, by the way, I hope that you will make yourself available of. And it's all because I had an epiphany of sorts, a real aha of sorts, an awakening in reading Gary Will's book. So I recommend that very highly too. Gary Will's, What Jesus Meant, a very short paperback read, and not just a good read, but an easy read. It's one of those cover-to-cover books. It's one of those books that once you start, you can't put down. I wish I could say that The Judas Syndrome was that quick a read. It's a more lengthy book than What Jesus Meant. So I actually hope that you'll avail yourself of both of them. Gary Will's What Jesus Meant. Not all the bookstores have it these days. It's not that young a publication. You can certainly find it online. It's a very reasonable price. But that book, and then, of course, The Judas Syndrome. And you can find links on my blog at manipulative-people.com to the Judas Syndrome and the page on Amazon for it. And you can also find it directly at many bookstores and on any of the online bookstores. And I believe you can even get it in electronic format as well. So I hope you'll make yourself available. I hope you will avail yourself of both of those books. They're great books, and this is not a paid endorsement for Dr. Wells, but let me tell you, that book really, really inspired me. So I hope you'll avail yourself of both What Jesus Meant and The Judas Syndrome. And as I was saying before, it's having come upon a new awareness, a complete epiphany, a real aha experience about exactly what he meant by all the things he was trying to say. And it just changed everything. But I have to tell you, it's a slow process. Conversion of the human heart doesn't happen overnight. Our hearts are hard and they're cold. They get that way because of our experience with this world. We have made for ourselves here a world that, by its very nature, is dog-eat-dog, competitive, And unfortunately, within our own species, it's the only species, by the way, where we are pretty much at war in some way with one another a lot of the time, trying to best each other for social position, economic position, for power, and also, in many ways, trying to rule and dominate over one another. And although the quest for dominance has always seemed to be a more masculine endeavor, these days especially, it's not just men who tend to do it. And we have right now, in the land of Christianity's birth, a silent but very deadly ethnic cleansing going on. It's not always so silent. There are episodic outbreaks that call some attention to the problem. But we have a serious, serious issue happening. There was a time when basically there were two Christian empires. The Byzantine Empire in the Middle East and the Roman Empire. But after them, the Mohammedan conquest, things changed slowly over time. There many times was still a very substantial Christian minority. And at various times in history, that minority and the Muslim or Islamic majority got along very well. But then there were these horrible times on both sides where war and dominance-seeking ideology tried to decimate the other side. And in modern times, in post-Crusade times, the oppression has always come from extremist groups who want their way to prevail. And not just between Christians and Muslims, but between different sects of Muslims. And unfortunately, we're in one of those times again. And just yesterday, in Egypt, one of the Coptic cathedrals was attacked, and dozens of people were killed. We don't know how many just yet will be the final death toll. And ISIS has regained a foothold in the ancient city of Palmyra in Syria, where they had been driven out not that long ago. And at the heart of this matter is the fact that Christian minorities, because they've been protected under secular dictators, not just in Egypt or Syria, but any of the countries where there have been these kind of ruthless tyrant dictators who keep the peace through an iron fist. And minorities, fearful for their very existence, have always shown deference to these dictators, simply because they were protected, not because they had any particular love for the dictators, but because they felt protected, because they were protected. But here's the problem. Under these iron-fisted rulers, a lot of injustices occurred. And in the name of reform and in the name of a more righteous social order, a more God-fearing social order, and a more a social order more in keeping with social justice principles contained in Islam, some of these extremist groups in the name of Islam have been eliminating all of those who they perceive to be either active supporters of or having provided tacit support to, passive support to these dictatorial rulers. And so in many cases, the Christian minority is seen as a cancer that has to be removed. And slowly, by surely, through terror, and I mentioned this last week, we've seen this before. I mentioned last week that my own grandmother was a victim of the same kind of genocidal thinking, the same kind of ethnic cleansing thinking. Her entire family wiped out for a similar reason. So we've seen this kind of thing before, and it's happening again. And so the question becomes, how do you address it? How does the world heal? Do we do it by bombing the crap out of some folks? Do we do it by using such lethal force that we just have to anticipate and accept collateral damage? Is violence the way, anyway, to combat violence? It's a really serious question. And for centuries, we have tried to solve our problems this way. And if it had worked, we wouldn't be in the shape we're in. Now, I've heard arguments. I've heard folks say, for example, I've heard several folks, matter of fact, I heard several radio broadcast commentators just last week because, we had an anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th. And I heard many commentators saying that it was absolutely essential that if we were ever to build decent relationships with our former enemies, that it was absolutely necessary to completely decimate them in war. The argument was made that unless the Japanese government, for example, was brought to full and total submission, by using such horrible force, such as the atomic bombs, and creating such massive horror that there was just simply no other choice but an unconditional surrender. That unless that was done, that the war would have been protracted and that there was still been trouble. So I've heard that argument. But I also know that it was the decimation that Germany faced at the close of World War I, the total decimation, that provided the breeding grounds for the unrest and the hate and the eventual demagoguery that brought Adolf Hitler to power and created the next and even greater world war that saw countless more millions lose their lives. So, I've heard the arguments. But folks who call themselves Christians celebrate at this time of the year the person that they affectionately use the label for or confer the title upon, Prince of Peace. And what exactly does that mean? Well, there's a certain kind of peace that comes with living life on a different plane. One by which the attachments and the temptations and the pulls and the rules of this world no longer have the kind of hold on us that they typically do. We're truly, many times, a slave to the dictates of our social order. And once we have transcended that, once we have turned ourselves over to living life on a higher plane, we've turned ourselves over to a higher operating principle, to something greater, to something bigger. Once that happens, and only when that happens, can we be free. I can testify to you that I am in the conversion process. I know I am. And I'm a stubborn old fool. And I'm a stubborn old fool who has come to intellectually know better. But making all of the rest of me outside of my intellect act as I have been becoming to believe is very difficult. The world and its temptations are very strong. It almost is like there are forces out there who don't want us to get it, who don't want to see us truly thrive, prosper, and who would rather we perish. And I think one day we're going to come to some reconciliation in all of our metaphors, our scientific metaphors, our philosophical metaphors, and our religious metaphors. I think one day we're going to come to some reconciliation with all of those metaphors and explain in a way that most people can really understand this dilemma that we all face. Do we live life on the world's terms, or do we live life on a different plane? And that's what this time of the year means to me, because you hear the calling. You hear the calling in different religions, different Christian denominations, I should say. This particular liturgical season is one when we prepare the way in our hearts and in our mentality, remembering the coming of the person who came to show us the way. He didn't just come to die, he could have died the day after he was born. All that was required was to die and pay a price. That was easy. Well, it wasn't easy, but it was straightforward and simple. No. He grew up among us, and then he taught. And he asked us to listen. And the things that he had to say are very profound. And so it's not just listening to what he had to say, but contemplating deeply what he meant by what he said. And that's how peace will eventually come about, because it comes about with a change of heart. And when you take the words to heart, and when you start to come to believe, you can feel your heart start to change. You can feel your heart start to change. And that's how we will make the world safe for one another. That's how we'll be safe from one another. When hearts and minds are converted, not when we've exercised enough force or have enough force that nobody would dare mess with us. It's when hearts and minds are fully converted. And that takes reaching hearts and reaching minds, carrying the message, living the example, showing the way, living the way, living in the manner that we were asked to live, which doesn't happen very much these days. I remember all too vividly those times that I simply looked the other way. When passing by someone who was panhandling or was holding up one of those homeless signs, sure glad my heart is not the same as it was back then. And very hopeful that in the coming years, it will be transformed even more. There is a certain kind of character I think we are meant to have, even though we all fall infinitely short. But that doesn't mean it's not attainable with enough faith, especially faith in the person who came to tell us with authority how we could do this. That's my personal testimony. So I love this time of year. I love all the sentiments about it. I especially love the singing. We have tons of activities in my community that my circle of associates and friends and family participates in every year. And this year, I'm going to be trying an even new charitable enterprise, thanks to the goodwill of our only energy provider in the area. They have partnered with several other corporations who are going to donate dollar for dollar whatever individuals donate into a fund for individuals who have a hard time paying their utility bills so that they can get compensation for and make a case for hardship for and get reimbursed for their utility so that they don't have to be cold this time of year. It's a magical time. Still is for me. Hope it is for you. And I hope that you're not one of those folks who, unfortunately, at this time of the year is feeling all the stress that some people do. And I hope that you'll do more than pray for those that are. I hope you'll take some kind of action. Not just to feel good for doing it, but because it's the right thing to do. Well, I could go on and on and on about this time of the year. As much as we have going on typically at this time of the year, it's still my favorite. Still my very favorite. And maybe it is yours, maybe it is not. Maybe you have a comment or two you want to make. But in any case, if you want to join the conversation for any reason, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be happy to take your call. Remember, you can call in or you can Skype in at that number, 718-717-8296, and I'll be happy to take your call. Well, next year, I've got a new workshop schedule. You can find it posted on crosscountryeducation.com. That's www.crosscountryeducation.com. You can also find details on my blog at www.manipulative-people.com. So you can find out where I'm going in January, in the middle of the month. I'll be headed toward the Central California area, starting in Bakersfield, I believe, and then ending up in San Jose. So I'll be looking forward to seeing folks out there. I'll be traveling back to that area later on. And I'm also going to be in February in the Birmingham, Alabama area. I'm going to be several other places, though, and you can find the details, as I said, either on my blog by heading over to www.manipulative-people.com and then moseying on over to the page where I give the listing of my workshops and seminars. And while you're there on the blog, you might just as well avail yourself of the hundreds of timely articles there on how to deal with disturbed characters, how to understand them, how to deal with manipulation, how to get by basically in this character disturbed world. And if you are a person yourself who know you have some serious character impairments and you want to make a difference in them, you'll get some timely tips on that too. And then there are links provided to my books, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, the Judas Syndrome, and also my book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, How Did We End Up Here? And my book, Character Disturbance, the most comprehensive book out there on all of the various disturbed characters, from narcissists to antisocials to sociopaths to borderlines, all of the disturbed characters that are likely to cause some problems in your life. How to understand them, how to deal with them, how to make a better life, and especially how to get help when you need help. All this in Character Disturbance. So I hope you avail yourself of the books and the online articles. And I hope you'll be watching out. I'm using every bit of spare time that I have over the next few weeks to put some finishing editing touches on the book that was supposed to be out many months ago. My second book with Dr. Kathy Armistead, my co-author, on the 10 Commandments of Character, how to lead a significant life. This is really important to me because it's not just that we have to teach certain life lessons and have our young people master them when they're younger for them to turn out to be decent young adults, but it's also important that those who in adulthood are still struggling with their character formation and are still showing, unfortunately, lots of problematic behaviors and still having relationship problems, still having problems holding a family together, still doing things to harm one's neighbor, etc., etc. It's important for folks like that to also become acquainted with and learn and master these important life lessons that I call the 10 Commandments of Character. So this is an important work to me, and one that I self-admittedly have dropped the ball on because I've been doing so much traveling and I haven't been taking the time that I need to take in order to finish the edits and get this book where it needs to be so that it is out and available. But I'm doing my best now that I have some time between now and my first tour of next January. So please keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears attuned. I'll have more updates for you later on the program as I get closer to publishing the book. And also, we'll be live again next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I invite you to join with me and call in if you have a mite to 718-717-8296 and join the conversation. And in the meantime, I hope you'll remember the special spirit of the season. If you can, don't just pray for those in need. Take some time to find those in need. Attune yourself to those who are having a particularly rough time this holiday season, and find some way to make their lives better. And I'll see you again next week.